of the Rutledge Perspective podcast, and now I am the host of the Rutledge Perspective on KCOH TV, The Boost, and I am so excited. My background in human resources and also in business and consulting has given me the opportunity to share information with all of you, and what we're going to do is talk about the foundational pieces, whether or not you're building a business or you're building a career. It all comes down to strategy and people. If you don't know where you're going, how do you know who needs to be on your team? So please join me, join in the conversation, catch the show both on the radio, on the app, and also on Facebook. And I will be on Tuesdays from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to seeing you there.
Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday. We're about to talk it out today, me and Jerry P. Beasley. Mm-hmm. And I do love Tuesdays. I say that all the time, but I do love Tuesdays. I love coming in here and spending time with y'all. So we're going to talk about resilience today. But before we do that, I got the PSAs, as always. Number one, the census, the time to fill in the census has been extended to the end of October. So if you have not yet filled out your census, you still have time. End of October to fill out your census. Now let's talk about some voting, y'all. So I posted on my Facebook page, the Associated Press actually put out a link, and it's where you can go and it lists by state when early voting starts. Now here's the deal. There are a number of states that don't have any early voting in person at all. But the states that do, there is in-person early voting, and then there is also no excuse in-person early voting. It's called no excuse in-person absentee voting. So you need to know which one you're talking about before you go show up, okay? And the website is interactives.ap.org, interactives.ap.org, and it goes by state and it tells you the date. So this week, Arizona, in-person voting. California has that no excuse in-person absentee voting. Idaho, no excuse in-person absentee voting. Illinois, in-person voting. Indiana, the no excuse in-person absentee voting. Iowa, no excuse in-person absentee voting. Maine, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, Montana, New Jersey, New Mexico, North Dakota, Ohio, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, South Dakota. They have no excuse in-person absentee voting. Vermont and Virginia and Wyoming also have in-person. Good morning, Odessa, Texas. Have no excuse in-person absentee voting. So again, I went and looked at all of this today because I wanted to know who was supposed to be voting or who could be voting. Make sure that you also double check. Is it all in-person early voting, or is it just the folks that are no excuse absentee in-person voting? Okay, so absentee means you're not going to be there on November 3rd to be able to cast your vote in person. So make sure you know which one it is. There are a number of states, and so every week up to November 3rd, I will list the states that are currently in voting, early voting. Many of them last a long time. Some of them starting in September, and they will last all the way up to voting day on November 3rd. We are 27 days away, y'all. 27 days away from November 3rd. So please, 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 hopefully everybody got registered. We want to thank the Urban League, or NAACP, was it, Jerry, that was here for registering to vote this weekend.
I'm sorry.
Who was here to register to vote this weekend?
Oh, everybody.
Everybody. So you could come register to vote. So KCOH held an event with the NAACP,
Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee.
So thank y'all for turning out and for coming to volunteer and for registering to vote. That happened this past Saturday. The deadline for Texas, I posted this yesterday, was yesterday, Monday, October 5th. So I'm assuming everybody who was eligible to vote could vote, made sure they were registered. So now that you're registered, now you can just make a plan. how you're going to show up, where you're going to show up, knowing where your polling place is. NRG is supposed to be an open polling place. Our polling in Texas starts on October 13th, I believe it is. And it's supposed to be a polling place where anybody can go and vote. Any registered voter can go and vote. When you show up to a poll, especially on November 3rd, because that is the day, anytime before then too, but especially on November 3rd, if you show up to vote and someone tells you you cannot vote, do not leave without asking for a provisional ballot. And you say, I want my provisional ballot as required by law. So that means you can still cast your vote, and then they just have to go through a process to make sure that you were registered, your signatures match, all that kind of stuff, okay? So make sure that you are doing everything you can to protect your vote. We don't know what's going to happen in Texas yet because our governor decided that you can only have one place to turn in your ballot, your paper ballot, one per county, which means one in Harris County with the millions of people that we have in Harris County. And now luckily I believe it's at NRG, which is a place that is a little bit easier to get to even if you take public transportation. But one place to collect ballots under the guise of integrity of the vote, when what we really know is it is a form of voter suppression because you're making it harder for people to vote. And this is not political, this is just fact. When you limit the way people can turn their vote in, that is a suppression activity. So make sure you make a plan. Make sure you figure out how you're going to vote. The reason I say he did it now is because there are, I believe, multiple lawsuits going on right now against that changing, because there are some counties that may have 350 people. That is not Harris County. Harris County has, I think it was 4.7 million or something that I read. So, which is another reason why you need to make sure you fill out your census, okay? Because our representation is determined by that. The voting districts are determined by that. So just make sure that you are having your voice heard, okay? It's very, very important. So vote, 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 vote. Whatever your vote is, whatever your position is, get educated. Make sure you are educated about the candidates. I heard somebody post the other day, and I love Red Table Talk. I don't know if you've watched that or not. That's the one with Jada Pinkett Smith, her mom, and her daughter. They actually have some really good people on. I think Brene Brown was on last week or week before. But they just had one about voting. And I didn't get to listen to the whole thing. I was looking at some of the comments because sometimes they'll replay some of the conversations or write some of the conversations in the comments. And one of the comments said, this is so sad. And I thought, wait, they're talking about voting. What do you mean it's so sad? And they said they were talking about how Willow wasn't really up on who the candidates were and what their positions were and all this kind of stuff. And they said, with all of the access that she has, it was really disturbing that she wasn't more educated than she was on what was going on and how to vote. I also have a really good friend of mine who happens to be a chief human resources officer at a big company. And she had her legal team do a voter education seminar. And so they did it, and it's a global company. They put it on virtually. They had, I think she said 4 or 5 sessions. And at first, people were like, I can't believe you're doing this. This is political. We can't do this as a company. And she said, this is not political. This is about educating. Mm-hmm. We are going to educate people how to vote. Mm-hmm. That is what we do as human resources professionals. We educate people. We develop leaders. We make sure people have the information they have to make decisions they need to make. Mm-hmm. She said once they did it, it was so well received, and there were things that people didn't understand and didn't know. So make sure that you educate yourself. There is no reason in this day and time for you to not know what the issues are, to not know where you need to go vote, and to understand that people are going to try to find a way to keep you from casting your vote. And you've got to be stronger than that. You've got to be more educated than that. You've got to be smarter than that. You've got to have a better plan than that. So make sure you know what your rights are. Make sure you have all of your documentation. Make sure you have all of your information. Make sure you know where you need to go. Plan your day. Get a snack, get a chair, get some water, get your earbuds, get your Audible, whatever you need to make sure that you're ready. Because people are turning out for votes. This is some of the highest early voting they've had in a very, very long time, which is really great because some states, not all states, some states can actually start counting votes before Election Day. Many cannot, but some can. So it'll be really nice to kind of see where those places are that we'll be able to count the votes early, which would be really nice. So PSA, vote, That's all I got to say. Just vote.
That's it.
All right. So let's talk about resilience. Resilience. And this came to me because there's so much going on, y'all. There's so much going on, and people are tired, and there's just a lot of craziness right now for all of us. There's a lot of craziness for all of us. If you are going back to work, if you are looking for work, if you are building a business, if you are trying to maintain, whatever it is, there is so much going on. And here's the deal. You know, we talk about people surviving or thriving or what have you. Humans are, by our very nature, resilient beings. We have a way of surviving and coming back. We just do. It's just, we would not be still here post dinosaurs if we weren't resilient beings. The challenge is that we can often get caught up in all the stuff that's going on and forget that we have a choice, and forget that we can move through processes and move through situations and challenges in a way that brings us to the other side, not only safely, and probably forever changed, but also in many cases stronger, wiser, smarter, all that good stuff. And resilience doesn't mean that nothing bad ever happens. That's not what resilient means. Resilient means that you take that stuff and you're able to still pull through on the other side. And the reason this came up to me is I've had a number of people over the last couple of weeks talk to me about some things that were going on and how they were going to push through and what needed to happen and how they were going to make it, et cetera, et cetera. And then even for my birthday month, I had an awesome birthday month. And then I went to my solo retreat, and I usually leave my solo retreat all energized and excited and ready. And it was still a good retreat, but there was just this heaviness this year. And I thought, well, that's just weird. It's just weird because I'm a glass half full kind of girl. That's how I like to live my life. That doesn't mean I don't see things that are a problem or things that are bad or things that are heavy. It's just that I choose not to stay in that space. I try to really own and understand and acknowledge the challenges and the heaviness and the difficulty, but also make a choice to not live there. Because it's easy to live there. But when you live there, then you are not serving your best, you're not fulfilling your purpose, and you are not reaping not only the rewards meant for you, but you are not being a reward or a blessing to someone else. So I really try not to live in that darkness. But it was dark nonetheless. And so as I came back and started thinking about everything that needs to happen and where we need to go and what we need to do and building a business and supporting other people that are building their businesses and blah, 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 all that craziness, I thought, you know what? This is about being resilient. This is about taking all the madness, understanding that it is just that, it is madness, and channeling it to move forward. Channeling it to move to a place that is productive. And that doesn't mean, again, that you don't acknowledge that it's tough, because it is tough, but it's not permanent, or it doesn't have to be permanent. And if you think about it, it's the challenges and the issues that we have are everywhere. So what came to me this morning, you'll hear it in my podcast this week too, is think about students, right? Kids in school, students. So students they have classes, they have dress codes, they have tryouts for stuff. They have which classes are they going to take? Which colleges are they going to apply to? How much have they performed if they're on a team or if they're in band or orchestra? There's all this pressure on them to not only to succeed, but to belong and to survive. And that's why in that situation, it's an easier microcosm for bullying, because you're right all there together. And even now they were saying, with all the kids that are online and doing virtual learning, that for those kids who really need that time to kind of be separate and be away and could just kind of hide in the back of the classroom, you can't do that now. Everybody's on Zoom. Everybody can see your face. Mm-hmm. So your ability to just kind of disappear is more difficult. So even more pressure, right? So the kid who didn't get, especially this year, didn't get new school clothes or whatever, right? Now everybody sees you. everybody sees your house, or they see that you're in the library because you can't do it at home, or whatever it is. So you got all of this stuff going on, even for students. And you would think that we as adults would know better, that we wouldn't be doing those same kind of things, that we wouldn't have those same kind of environments, but we do. It just happens to be at a different level. So walk into any company, right? Any company, especially those that are older, more storied companies, and even the ones that are on whatever best of list that you can think of. Best company to work for, best company for working women, best company for insert thing here. But when you walk through that company, who's in which meeting? Who gets to sit on what floor? Who's in what kind of office? Because now they're realizing that open spaces aren't all they're cracked up to be. Who got the corner office? Who got the best office? Who got the best computer? Who waited to get their email? Who, all of this kind of stuff that gives us a chance to put people in categories and put people in classes. And what happens is people begin to show up to work not necessarily as their full authentic selves. They may be real, but they're not showing up completely, because there's a lot of stuff that if they showed up completely gets either misconstrued or they get beat up for or what have you. And it's beyond whether or not you're wearing natural hair or straight hair. It's beyond whether or not you have tattoos or don't have tattoos. It's deeper than that. And you would think that we as adults had learned by now, but we have not. And small business owners, sidebar for you, just because your business is small doesn't mean this stuff didn't happen in your business too. So be mindful of what culture you say you want and whether or not your words and your actions align with what you say you want. Because often that's where the disconnect happens. Because if you're rewarding behavior that's contrary to what you say, that's the behavior that's going to happen. They're not going to go with what you say. They're going to go with what you reward. So they're going to go with your actions. So that resilience, we're all challenged with this stuff that comes at us, whether it's at home, it's at work, it's at school, it's at play. Who's got the best car? Who's got the best house? Which neighborhood do you live in? All this kind of stuff. And then you add on top of it all of the societal stuff that's going on now. The pandemic, the cost of healthcare, the cost of school, whether or not we should still be paying for school when everybody's going virtually. Why should you still be paying the same thing to colleges when nobody's going to a classroom or nobody's in a dorm? All of those things start to break us down and wear us down and have us show up as something other than who we are just to survive. And many of us get in that survival mode and we tend to stay there. And it's kind of that response. I was reading an article in Harvard Business Review this week, and they compared resilience and being able to be resilient to the understanding of grief, right? So when you go through, the disbelief, the anger, and I always forget the fifth one, the fourth one, disbelief, anger, and the last one is acceptance, right?
Reasoning is one.
Reasoning, yeah, and negotiating, those kind of things, when you go through the 5 stages of grief. And it's almost that same thing when you're talking about resilience, because you either are in fight, flight, or freeze mode. Right? So it may be so much that those people now are saying, I am a fighter. I'm a fighter. I am not going to let this COVID thing take me down. Now, it could go so far as those folks who refuse to wear masks and all that kind of stuff, right? So we're fighting change. Even change that's good for us. We're just fighting the fight. Then you have the people who just kind of freeze. Like, I don't know what to do. It's bad, but do I wear a mask? Do I not wear a mask? Should I go out? Should I stay? And they just freeze. It's paralysis, right? And then you have the people that are flee. They're like, I'm so out. I'm moving. Right? It's so crazy here. Catch me in Barcelona, right? And we all have those responses. But resiliency means that we recognize what's going on. We recognize our response in the moment. We understand what we have to do to survive in the moment. But we also understand that there is an other side. And I said today when I did my podcast, I'm like, I truly believe that resilience is a superpower. Mm-hmm. And we all have it. It's just whether or not we use it and whether or not we stand in it. Because resilience is also not easy. It's one of the reasons that experience is so valuable. Because experience, those folks who are truly experienced, we call them, experienced people as opposed to senior people or old people. We call them experienced people. Because that experience comes with battle scars. That experience comes with many, many things that you have been through. That experience comes with wisdom. And that wisdom enables you to be resilient, because as you go through challenges and you make it to the other side, those lessons that you learn, it's not a failure, it's a lesson. And when you learn those become then in your toolbox so that the next time, it's not that you have to be more resilient, you just know how to handle it. So that your superpower of resilience and your need for that superpower of resilience actually starts ratcheting up each time because you're able to handle more and more and more. Now, we all have a breaking point. We all have a breaking point. My challenge to you is I don't know that our breaking points are as early as we believe them to be. I think we just get tired. And especially now with so much going on, when there's so much coming at us and there's so much change and there's so much turmoil and there's so much conflict, we get tired. And we don't necessarily have the energy to fight the fight. It's easier to just flee or freeze. And it's the decision of whether or not it's worth it, whether or not we're worth it. Because at the end of the day, that's really what it's about. It's not necessarily about whether or not it's worth it. It's whether or not we are worth it. Do you believe that what you have to give and what you deserve are worth the fight? And only you can answer that in the circumstance you find yourself in. And sometimes the fight is worth it and sometimes it's not. More often it is if we can find the energy to do it. But another piece of resilience is owning that period of time where you need to just sit and be in whatever that is you're feeling. You know, for me, that's sitting in that darkness and that craziness and that despair and that what is going on? Why did I make this decision again? Have I lost my mind? You know, and sitting and owning that, because all of that stuff is real. All of that stuff is real. But then taking that and saying, okay, let's practice the pause before I go down this rabbit hole of, oh my gosh, what's happening? Let me pause and say, okay, wait, let's go back to the big why. Why did I do this? Why was this important? Why is it still important? And if all of those things ring true, then why am I sitting in despair? And how can I do something different? How can I own it, acknowledge it, be kind and compassionate to myself, and then move on? Because one way to move to resiliency and to be resilient is to acknowledge the situation that you're in. And to acknowledge that there's stuff that's going on that is unpleasant and that is hard.
Can I say this? Because it was something the doctor just said. I had a psychologist on that I thought I wanted to share with you before we got on the air, but I want to share this because she talked, when you said that, when you look around and you see other people, and I said, I almost got this anxiety because I saw somebody, a preacher was saying, it's time to grind, it's time to grind, you got to get on the grind, you got to have your calendar ready for this and this and that. And I'm like, oh Lord, I'm not doing all of that. And then it was like a reality check came in and said, you're doing what is needful.
Exactly.
And sometimes I think we get in that rush mode, and then she broke down to do a word study on the word rush.
Yes.
And when you're rushing, you're going to get anxiety. You're going to have all these feelings of, I don't have enough to, I can't do this. And then when you said about losing the desire or don't have the energy to do it, something that I have a passion for, I have a passion for.
Yes.
But when I believe that passion is waning is when I can't even find the energy to do it.
Yes.
So how do you work with that?
Yes.
People feel like they still have the passion.
Right. But you just don't have the energy. And that's why I say practice the pause, right? Because if there's something that you know, it is your calling, it is your purpose, you are passionate about it, and all of a sudden you're not, before you just own that, practice the pause. That's why the question why is so important. That's the basis of root cause, right? Ask yourself why 5 times. That's basic root cause analysis. By the time you get to the 5th why, you've probably gotten at the real reason why something's happening. So it's that practicing the pause. It's standing back in, wait a minute, I didn't make this just willy-nilly. Now, sometimes we do, we're like, oh, I just made that because I had to do something fast. But if it's something that we have thought about and really practiced for or planned for or done intentionally, and all of a sudden it doesn't feel good, pause. Pause. And ask why. Why doesn't this feel? First, ask, what doesn't feel good? What does this feel like? Because sometimes that lack of energy is truly just fatigue, right? There's truly just, I just need to go somewhere and sit down, right? Sometimes that fatigue or that lack of energy is because there's so much other noise that's getting in that is taking your attention and it's distracting. And so first understand what is it that you're feeling and then get to your why. Why am I feeling this? Am I really not passionate about this anymore? Has everything changed around me to say that this is no longer the right path? This is what business owners often have to do when they talk about pivoting. What organizations have to do when they talk about pivoting. Why doesn't this feel good anymore? Feel is a different word in a corporation, right? But why doesn't this feel right? Why isn't this no longer working? Why is it no longer working for me or working for my clients? Or if something starts not working that always worked before, pause, get clear on what is not working as clear as you can, and then ask why. Because once you understand why, then you can make a decision. Oh, you know what? The passion is truly waned because that is no longer where I need to be. Or there is so much stuff going on. It's not that my passion for this has gone away. It's that there are some things that are getting in the way that I need to decide either to deal with or to push aside so that I can then move back to where I know I want and need to be. But until you give yourself that time to pause and practice, practice the pause and ask why, you're going to be sitting in that overwhelm. And to the point that your psychologist made, we have to be mindful of what we tell ourselves too. And I remember with my therapist, there was one time very early, and I was like, I don't know what I was talking about, but it was in one of those spirals. And I remember her pausing and saying, okay, what you just said to yourself, would you say that to somebody else? I was like, or she said, what you just said, would you say that to somebody? I was like, oh my gosh, no, I would never say that to anybody because that's just rude. You just don't do that. I may think it, but I'm never going to say that out loud. And she said, well, why do you say that stuff to yourself? And I had to just stop a minute because that's a good question. That's a really good question. So when you're lacking that energy, when you're feeling like your passion is not there, when it's like, man, I was working 80 hours a week for somebody else and I can't seem to get 40 in for me.
Right.
And this is my business. So instead of sitting in that, why can't I, why don't I, when you're pointing fingers at yourself and you're beating yourself up because of something that you're doing or not doing, pause. What is causing the lack of energy? What is causing the lack of focus? Do you just need rest? Do you need to reset? Do you need to let something else go? We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. When you're holding on so tight to something, you don't make room for the stuff that's meant for you. Sometimes you got to let some stuff go because it's no longer meant for you. Mm-hmm. So and that's part of resiliency too. Part of resiliency is knowing when to let go so that you can move forward and get into that space that you're supposed to be, delivering what you're supposed to deliver and serving those you're supposed to serve. Mm-hmm. But that's about also being really honest with you, about you, and with you about the circumstances in which you find yourself. Because sometimes the answer is, I'm in survival mode right now because I need to be. Right now, what I need to do is survive this particular circumstance so I can live to fight another day. And don't beat yourself up about that either, because sometimes survival mode is the right place to be. Sometimes freezing is the right thing to do, and sometimes fighting. So we just got to understand that all of those responses have valid reasons for existing. Mm-hmm. The challenge is not to sit in any one longer than is necessary. Mm-hmm. So don't sit frozen forever. Just like they say, a goal without a plan is just a wish. Mm-hmm. If you're sitting on that goal, this is where I want to go, this is where I want to go, this is where I want to go, this is where I want to go. You ain't made a plan. Mm-hmm. You haven't put people around you to help you get there. You haven't done any of that. You're frozen. You will never make that goal. Mm-hmm. Because it takes action. It takes a plan. And being resilient is saying, oop, I've had to change. And I'm not sure what I need to do. And I really got busted up and bloodied. But I'm coming back because I know this is where I'm supposed to be. That's resilience. That is resilience. And it's important to stand in that and to stand in your power because, again, resilience is a superpower. I truly believe that. Because we all have the capacity to be resilient. Again, human beings are resilient entities. We are resilient beings. But we don't always do that because we have bought into the fact that we can't.
When is resilience stupid? And the reason I said that is because when I saw the leader stand up and would take the mask off and stood up and got out of the hospital, when is that? Okay, some can say that's a warrior, that's a superpower. I'm never going to give up. I'm going to show you that I'm well. Is that resilience? Never giving up no matter what? Is what I'm asking.
So that's a really good question. So part of the reason you practice the pause, so you can ask why and figure out what's really going on, is sometimes you need to say enough. Sometimes you need to say it's time to go. Sometimes you need to say this is no longer serving me or anyone else. And sometimes what people may see as, oh, they really stood up, they're doing the best thing, it is just stupid. It is not resilient, nor is it powerful. And it sends a very interesting message to people. So I'll give you another example. When you are a leader and you are ill, and I'm talking about this leader we have now, when you're a leader and you're ill, you have the flu, or you have a cold, or you've gone out and had knee surgery, or anything that takes you kind of off your game. Mm-hmm. But you're supposed to be out for 6 weeks, right? So I'm thinking back to, my corporate days where you have a certain amount of time that you're off, like if you have a knee surgery or something, that you're really supposed to be off, like not on systems, not all that kind of stuff. But what you do is, as soon as you're out of the hospital and out of anesthesia, you're on your email, you're on your phone, you're attending a meeting, you're making all this kind of stuff happen. What you're doing is telling people that it is not okay to heal.
Right.
It is not okay to be sick. It is not okay to need a minute. It is not okay to take vacation. That's what you're teaching people as a leader. That if you are not here, things will completely fall down. You're teaching them you don't trust them. Mm-hmm. You're teaching them that nothing can be done without you. You're teaching them that if they make a mistake, you're going to beat them up because you're going to say, well, see, if I had been here, something else would have happened. That's what that kind of behavior does. It is not necessarily showing strength or conviction or resilience or power. It is actually doing the opposite depending on your situation. It is telling people that it's not okay to be vulnerable. It's telling people that it's not okay to be perfect. It's telling people that you have to show up even when it's time not to. Because part of resilience is knowing when it's time to rest.
I told a friend that who had COVID, and this is way before the other one got it. Mm-hmm. And they were like, I said, how long did you have it? I don't know. I was sick, but I wasn't going to take off work because I come from the school of, you got to make it happen. You got to make it happen.
Yes.
I said, and she said, and I'm walking by faith and not by sight. And I said, but you potentially spreaded that
right
to other people.
Right. Who may be vulnerable.
So when did your faith not say, this is not wisdom?
Right.
Because faith without works is dead, but there's a wisdom.
Right.
And said, okay, if I'm sick, I should really think about it. And when you said about that, it takes a pause. Mm-hmm. When we had this event on Saturday, I honestly didn't want to come here on Saturday because it was my off day, and I planned on going to Austin early that morning. So I said no on Friday. But on Saturday, it was like, no, you got to be there. Mm. You're the leader. You got to be there. You got to do what you got to do. And it was the best decision that I made. So the pause was necessary.
Yes. Yes. And here's the thing. It is important to understand the impact that you have on others. Because none of us operates in a bubble. None of us does.
Yeah.
What we do impacts somebody, somewhere, at some time. If you're leading people, the way you act or the way you behave impacts them. Mm-hmm. If you never take a vacation, if you're working 40, 50 hours a week, if you're sending emails at 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning, I told you guys, I had to own that myself. Because my brain will turn on and I'm like, oh, let me just send this quick email, not realizing, I think I realized I just didn't think about it. It wasn't top of mind that when that person then gets up at 8 the next morning or 6 the next morning or whatever and sees that I sent something at 1, they're like, oh my gosh, I got to respond now. Well, no, my intent wasn't for them to respond at 1 o'clock. My intent was to get it off my brain so I wouldn't forget it. But I didn't say that. Right? So it is important. There's a difference between being resilient and coming through a situation and acting wisely and acting as if you are a part of a bigger global body politic, right? That there are more people than just you in this space. Those are two different things. Resilience is coming through. Resilience is, we came through a real hardship, but we made it to the other side. That's resilience. And we are scarred and we are bruised, but we are not broken. Yeah. Right? Or we are bruised and broken, but we're still here. Whatever that is. Because sometimes we're bruised and broken and beat up and everything else, but we may be crawling, but we're going to get there. And that's resilience. Wisdom is knowing that sometimes you need to stay home.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to not send that email. Sometimes you need to rest. That's wisdom. That is wisdom. And that's why you practice the pause, especially those of us that are experienced. Because the other thing, Jerry, to your point is, those of us of a certain age definitely grew up in that time where unless you are on your deathbed, you go to work.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be in the hospital to not show up. And the problem with that is, and that comes from generations, right? And that comes from the Industrial Revolution. That comes through all of that stuff. And we can't beat people up who gave us those messages because those were the best messages given the situation at the time. What wisdom is understanding when circumstances change, and when we know better, we do better.
Yeah.
So great. You showed up. You showed you were committed, all that kind of stuff. But how many other people got sick because you showed up? Even when it was just the flu or just a cold or what have you, right? Mm-hmm. It's not about the illness itself. It's about the fact that our desire to just make sure that people know we're committed only showed up in one way. That the only way you can be committed is to show up. Sometimes the way you're committed is to say, you know what? I'm not going to show up today, but this is why. And if I'm able, I can still work. I just won't be there with you. Because we're also in different times where you don't have to be physically present to show up. Mm-hmm. Not anymore. You can be on a call. You can be on a video conference. There's a whole lot of ways to show up these days that we didn't have before and that our parents and our grandparents didn't have. And so our ability to take care of ourselves while showing up and taking care of others is much different than it was before. We are able to do much more than we were able to do before because we have that time, we have that challenge, we have that opportunity, we have that technology to do things differently. So being resilient and being wise are not the same thing. They are
because
not
you
the
could
same
be
thing.
pushing past the change while you're still, bless God, I'm going to go ahead anyway. There
Mm-hmm.
could be some alterations being done.
Mm-hmm.
And we get overexcited, and as I see Michelle Johnson say, we should not rush the process. And I think sometimes we are because we're in a new. One of the doctors said,
Yes.
He said this is a new thing for all of us. We're in a whole new world right now.
A whole new world. And that's where when I talked earlier about those people who are, fighters, right? They are fighting so hard to get back to what they know. There is so much damage happening because they are determined to get back to pre-COVID. Let's just show up. Let's just go to work. It's okay. We're cleaning everything, but it's all right. Let's just do things the way we used to. We will never, ever go back to what we were before COVID. Ever.
Laurel, is that scary sounding? Because I hear a lot of people say that.
It's only scary if your assumption is never going back means that what's going forward is bad. So, it's different. It's not necessarily better or worse. It is just different. And so only is it scary. All change is scary. And that's the problem. It's because we're having to change. And nobody likes change. And change is scary because we are comfortable with the familiar. Which is why I'm always surprised that people don't like to be clear. Because they think being clear is ugly. There's comfort in clarity. Be clear, right? But change is hard. Change is uncertain. And we like things to be certain. We like to know what we're dealing with. That's why you hear people say the enemy you know. It's easier to deal with the enemy than you know. Mm-hmm. And so, that's why you hear people say that. And there's some comfort in the enemy. I at least already know how they're going to act. I don't know how somebody else is going to behave in this circumstance. So because I know how they're going to respond, I know what I need to do. But you only act in fear if your assumption is change is bad. Or your assumption is it's changing. I don't know if I'm going to be able to still be as helpful, smart, capable, whatever in this change, in this new world. Am I still going to have value in the new world? Am I still going to have the same position? Will I still get the same promotion? Because most things, especially in organizations, it's what's in it for me, right? With them. What's in it for me? As you start to make changes, you always got to keep in mind what's in it for the other person because that's where they're coming from. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're making this change, but why? What does it do to me? What does it do to my job? What does it do to my family? What does it do to my position? Because we still have a large percentage of our psyche that says, I am what I do. And you can see that every day when people meet somebody else. Oh, what's your name? Where are you from? What do you do? Top 3 questions. What's your name? Where are you from? What do you do? And those 3 things begin to make our picture of who the person is. But what we do is just that. It's not who we are. It's what we do. It's how we take the skills that are who we are and utilize them to the best of our ability. But the job is not who you are. And unfortunately, that's how companies really, really keep people handcuffed. Other than, we call them golden handcuffs. You know, those organizations that pay lots of money to get you to stay. And then people get used to the money and don't want to stay and don't want to leave, even when it's in their best interest to leave. It's because we really get tied up in title and position. And that's not to say those things aren't important, because there is power that comes with position. That's just the reality of how our society is structured. There is power that comes with position. And those in power have a responsibility to use that power wisely.
I just told somebody just the other day, I said, I at this age, I care less about title. It's about purpose. Because you can have the title,
right,
but if you're not fulfilling purpose,
right,
you just have a title and a lot of responsibility that has nothing to do with your purpose.
Right.
And I think this season that we're in, this pandemic season, has really kind of made us have to pivot and restructure some things,
right,
and recognize that the title wasn't us.
Right.
It was the essence. Because you can still have that ability to do great things elsewhere.
You can be a leader without having the title of leader.
You better. Because real leaders stand up.
Real leaders stand up and real leaders stand out. And that has nothing to do with title. That has nothing to do with title. You can lead from the back. You can lead from the back, you know? And so we get caught up in those material things. Just like I was talking about students earlier, we get caught up in who's got the newest shoes, who's got the newest clothes, you know, who's coming in and they're the goth kid, right? Or they're the band geek, or they're the whatever. We tend to societally try to categorize people so we can know how to deal with them, right? It's a survival mechanism. I know how to manage you because I can put you in this category here. And this category, I have certain assumptions about that which inform my behavior. Whether or not those assumptions are true are irrelevant. But they are my assumptions, and that's how I move. And unless we are wise and challenge our assumptions, we will always be categorizing people by those same things. That's what's happening in society right now. People see someone and assume something based on gender, based on sexual orientation, based on skin color, based on whatever. And they make assumptions and they behave accordingly. And those assumptions may or may not be based in fact or experience. They may have been something that was just passed down because someone else decided it was true. And that's why you will always hear me say on this show, people that work with me directly will hear me say this all the time. It is important that you not only seek your truth, but you understand what other people's truth is so you can either solidify or negate your own. How do you know what's true for you if you've never heard anybody else's? And it's important when someone else is speaking their truth to you that you don't assume that their truth is inaccurate or that their experience isn't real, because their experience is their experience. Now, you can give them a perspective on their experience based on yours, but do that in a way that is compassionate and acknowledging that everyone has experiences that are different and everyone has experiences that are valid. The challenge is, does someone then take that experience and spread it like peanut butter and assume every whatever is the same way because they experienced it one way one time? And leaders, good leaders, understand their vulnerabilities. Good leaders understand their gaps, and good leaders are wise in seeking not only validation for the things that they think they know, but they're seeking information to fill in the gaps where there's stuff that they do not know. And they are humble enough and confident enough to ask. As I said last week, this is not a time in voting. This is not a time for you to be ashamed of not understanding. Go ask somebody. Go ask somebody. It is important. Your vote and your voice is too important. Go ask someone. Go ask someone you trust, and then go read and go find out. And if you don't understand it, ask someone you trust to explain it to you. And then make your decision based on that. But make sure it's someone you trust, and make sure you tell them, I need you to just read this to me and explain it to me as it is. I don't want an opinion. I just want the facts myself. And then I'm going to ask your opinion. This is a time to use your voice, not only to understand and educate yourself before you vote, but then to use your voice as your vote. This is the time to do that. And as leaders, it's really important that we remember that and we honor that. and that we honor that people have different experiences, and everyone brings their experiences with them everywhere they go. Everywhere they go. Our experiences inform our behavior.
You said something. You said leaders lead from the back. And I remember T.D. Jakes preached the message that true leadership is in the back. It's not always in the front. And leaders lead from the back. And I thought about when I first started working here years ago, and one of the radio announcers, much older, Ralph Cooper, would say, make sure you tell the people to vote. And in my lack of experience about it, I didn't care. I was like, I'm not going to be on here reminding folks to do what grown folks know to do. And I was strong in that stupidity.
Yes.
But as it went further, and as I grew, and as I got more knowledge, and as I watched more news and got more interested, I said the other day, I said, I owe Ralph Cooper an apology. The Jerry that started here is not the same Jerry.
Exactly.
And so I'm constantly saying, go vote, go do this, go get your, figure it out, know what you need to know, know what you need. And I can understand people who are lackadaisical because I was once there, but once you know better, you do better.
Yes. And that's where I think we are. There has never been a better time to do better. There's never been a better time and an easier time to educate yourself. Now, you do have to be discerning. You have to be smart because there's a lot of bad information out there. There's a lot of inaccurate information. There's a lot of purposefully hurtful and inaccurate information out there. So you do have to be smart.
Yeah.
But it is easier now than ever in history to get information that you want. Now more than ever. And so there is no excuse to not be educated. There is no excuse for not understanding who's running for something and what they stand for. There is no reason for you to not understand what is going on. None whatsoever.
Do you think that technology kind of messed us up in a way? It's good, it's a blessing, and in a way it's a curse because most people are not researching. They're going to go by, I got it from YouTube. I got it from this.
Yes.
I got it from that.
I think in some ways technology has made us lazy.
Yeah.
In some ways, technology has made us lazy. I remember, when I had to do research papers, you had to go to the library, you had to look at the card catalog, you had to, look it up in the encyclopedia. Now you just type in Wikipedia, right? Or you go on YouTube. You can learn how to change oil on YouTube. So in some ways, it has made us much more self-sufficient, right? But it has made us lazy in that it has given us instant gratification. That's one of the conversations I always have with earlier career people, and I don't want to call them just millennials. It's earlier career people. Is this disconnect between what they believe that they are ready to do versus what they are truly ready to do, especially when they look at some of the other people in the organization who may be older or more senior or more experienced and may not have the same energy as they have, right? And they're thinking, but why do I have to wait to get this position? And the conversation I have with them all the time is, you're right. It is not going to necessarily take you 10 years to get the same place that it took this person 10 years to get. You are absolutely right. And it took them 10 years because there was a level of experience and exposure and do it by hand that you had to do that you don't have to do now. They spent the time setting it up. There's stuff that's established. There's processes and everything that's established now. And in many cases, you can push a button. That means that it's not going to take you 10 years, but that's also not the same level of role. Because the same level of experience, the same level of not necessarily intellect, but the same level of exposure, the same level of battle scars is not necessary. So yes, it's not going to take you 10 years, but don't assume that because you are ready to do it now that it's still the same level of role, because that's not necessarily true either.
It's not.
So, it is, we still have a world of gray that we are trying to make black and white. And most things are gray. Most things are gray. Those things that are very much black and white, depend on your perspective. I'm one of those people, I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to cheat, I'm not going to steal. Unless you're doing something to my mama, and then all bets are off. And I mean that, right? I'm like, all bets are off. If you are hurting my family, I will do what's necessary to protect my family. Even if that means that I may be harming myself. Because it's my family, and you're not going to hurt my family, right? And that for me is black and white, right? So is, I'm not going to lie, cheat, or steal. That's black and white. So there are things that for us individually are non-negotiable. We talked last week about, when I talked about my friend in Austin about, who your client is, what you're going to go after, how you're going to show up. And there's things that are non-negotiable. There are opinions that I have that are truly my opinions. And there are some places that I will be very vocal about those opinions, and then there are other places where my opinion is irrelevant, because that's not the point. The point is the service that I'm giving. And I can give a perspective when asked for it, but it's not about me, right? And your opinions are about you. Service is about the other person. And so depending on where I am, I'm always going to show up as me, always, because I don't know how to be anything else. But how deep you get of me will depend on the situation. Because not all of me needs to show up for everything. And I shouldn't feel like I have to show up a certain way just to survive. That's the nuance. And that's what happens in organizations. When people feel like they cannot show up at all like themselves, that's the diversity, equity, and inclusion problem. But when I am choosing about how I show up because of the circumstances or because of the environment, and I'm trying to be appropriate, I've used this example before, the corporate party versus the backyard barbecue. I show up differently for those. My language may be different when I'm talking to my girlfriends than when I'm talking here on the radio. Because the environment is different. There's a time when you can just let your hair down. And there's a time when you need to be a little bit more buttoned up. But you're still authentic. You're still who you are. But when you are in a situation where you cannot be who you are, your ability to move through that, to get the lessons from that and come out on the other side better, stronger, faster, bigger, that's resilience. It's not letting those seeds of doubt get so deep inside your soul that you begin to believe them. And that's what happens. They say, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. I saw an article the other day that says that is not true. Words can actually hurt worse than sticks and stones because words get deep. Words get really deep, and you remember words. And even if you can't remember the specific word, you remember something was said to you when you were really little that has stuck with you this time and has informed your behavior. So don't be fooled that words don't matter. Words matter. And I say that all the time. Words matter. The words you use with other people and the words you use to yourself. And
words can drive you.
Yes, words can absolutely drive you, and words can crater you. Words are powerful. Words are powerful. And our perspectives are powerful, and our opinions are powerful, and the way we show up is powerful, and we have to own all of that. And our resilience is in being able to own it and understand it and be who we are, the best person we can be, and keep moving. That's how that works.
Yeah. Now, when you say that, because, I remember one time years ago when I worked at another radio station, a young lady went with me that worked at the radio station to an event. And she said this in dismay. She said, everybody's speaking to you. Everybody knows you. And she was mad. And I said, well, yeah, I've been in radio for 10 years. You just started a year ago.
Right.
So when you said because some things will come with experience.
Yes.
And some things will come over a period of time. And that's what causes you to have resilience, because resilience actually pays off.
It does.
And it will give you a resume if you have resilience and that you're not all over the place, but you have been consistent in some areas and some things. So that just made me think about
it. Exactly. Well, and I think, it is important to be honest and to know you and to own you, right? To know your gaps. I won't say weaknesses, because I think, yes, there are things that we are not as good at as others, but that's not necessarily a weakness. That's just a gap or a less than stellar skill. And owning that and knowing who you are and how you show up and knowing where you want to go. It's important to know how all of that fits together. Because if you have, that's the other piece of resilience. If you know what your ultimate goal is, if you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, that also helps you be more resilient, because you can move through that point of pain because you know there's something on the other side. But if you allow yourself to just sit in the discomfort and just stay there and not move, you're not serving yourself and you're not serving others. You are not living into what you have the capability of doing. But if you haven't practiced the pause, if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a perspective, it is difficult to be resilient because you don't know why. Why should I move? Why shouldn't I just go to bed? And believe me, I've had those days where I'm like, you know what? I could really just put my pajamas back on and just go to bed and just sleep for days. Get up, eat, and just sleep. Because I'm tired. My energy's drained. I just don't want to, right? However, I also have a plan. And I have a purpose. And I know that I've been very, very much blessed to be where I am and given the opportunities that I am. And who am I to be so selfish as to completely disconnect for extreme periods of time just because I'm tired? Now, that doesn't mean I don't need to rest. And there are times when I'm like that. I'm like, you know what? This weekend, I'm doing nothing except what I want to do, which may be just sit on my couch with my feet up watching movies. Because I need to regroup. And I own that, and I give myself permission to do that. Because I know if I practice that pause, then I'm ready. When Monday comes, I'm fired up. I'm pumped up. I'm ready to go. So resilience requires empathy and sympathy. It requires compassion. You have to be compassionate with yourself to be resilient. Because if you are not, you will be sitting in that overwhelm. You will be sitting in that space that says, I can't believe, why did they, why can't I, why shouldn't they, we can't change. All of that mess will keep you from being resilient if you allow it to seed deep in your psyche and if you allow it to drive you.
And the key thing too, you said you got to know what you want to do.
You got to know what you want to do.
It makes me think about this one guy some years ago. He said, Jerry, you need to be at this radio station because and it was a good offer, but when I knew what I wanted to do, it didn't match what I wanted to do.
Right.
I can do one aspect, I can be on the mic, but it's not going to allow me to put other people on the mic.
Right.
Even though it was more money, it's still, what outweighs it for you? What is your purpose and what is it that you want to do?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good.
It is really important to stay focused on, keep your eyes on the prize. What is the end goal?
Yeah.
Because then when it gets dark, you at least know where you're going. You still have this beacon that is directing you to a path. So even if you have to swerve on the path, you have to take a side trip, you at least know that ultimately you are moving forward towards your goal. That's really important. And along those notes, as we're getting close, I posted it on my page, I think. I'll post it on LinkedIn as well. Don't forget that the 5 Secret Summit Career Edition is coming up on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the 12th, 13th, and 14th of October. It'll be virtual. It's from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Central, so quick burn, just 3 days. I'll be giving away some stuff too. But this is the kind of stuff we're going to talk about. How do you build that same strategy, those 5 secrets to building that same strategy around your career as you do building a team for your business? Because you need a team for your career, whatever that looks like, whether that's nonprofit, whether it's corporate, whether it's building a business, you need a team around you for that too. And you need a strategy and a structure for that too, just like you do for building a business. And so we're going to talk about that. October 12th, 13th, and 14th, 6 to 7:30 p.m. Central. Register. You have to register. It's $97 for the 3 days. And I'll be giving away some stuff, which should be a lot of fun. So you go to laurelrutledge.com/summit-career to get there. Or like I said, you can go on my page, my Facebook page, and see it. You can go on my LinkedIn page. You can find it. Instagram, you can find it. So places. But I would love to see you there and love to be able to share this information with you guys. And move you forward, because there is while we all get overwhelmed, it is not necessary to just sit in overwhelm. You don't have to sit in overwhelm. There are ways to move yourself through it and to acknowledge and to give yourself grace that sometimes it's just overwhelming and sometimes you need a minute and sometimes you need to eat that pint of ice cream. You just do. You just need to sit and wallow. But I think I said it on my podcast, wallow, get in that mud puddle and wallow. And then make you some mud pies, jump around in it like your kids do and your dogs do because they love getting dirty. And then go clean yourself up and keep it moving. That's what we do. You got to be in the mess, but you can move yourself out of the mess. So that's the show today. Remember, resilience is your superpower. We all have the power to be resilient. I want you to go out and be resilient. If you are feeling in that place today where you're like, oh, I just don't know. Yes, you do. Yeah. Practice the pause. Just pause. Figure out what it is that's going on. Then ask yourself why you're there, what you need to do to get out, and keep it moving. And find yourself a tribe that can support you in doing that. Find yourself a village. A lot of people use tribe. I use village because it takes a village. I know I got one because I take some work. So find your village. Find your superpower. And we will catch you on the air next week. Thank y'all for tuning in.